the silence was broken by an explosion, and then another. Just a few days ago, on a quiet morning, a high-security military base, the pride of Russia's Pacific Fleet, deep inside its own territory, erupted in flames. The official story from Moscow was a simple, tragic accident, a mundane equipment failure. But the truth is far more complex and far more dangerous. This was no accident. It was a message delivered with lethal precision from over 6,000 kilometers away. The incident struck deep within the heartland of Russia's Pacific military presence. While Russian authorities swiftly reported an incident with gas equipment, Ukrainian intelligence sources claimed responsibility for a meticulously planned, covert operation. This event in Chitova has unveiled a potential new front in the war, raising profound questions about the operational reach of Ukraine's special forces and the vulnerability of Russia's most secure military assets. On that recent September morning, at approximately 9 a.m. local time, the calm of Chitova, a small but strategic settlement in Russia's Primorsky Krai, was violently disrupted. Two powerful explosions detonated in the parking area of a military compound, the headquarters of Russia's 155th Guards Marine Brigade. This region, with Vladivostok as its capital, is not just some remote outpost. It is the strategic anchor of Russia's entire Pacific presence, home to the Pacific Fleet's main naval base, nuclear submarine pens, and critical shipyards. The attack struck at the heart of Russia's perceived eastern invulnerability. The 155th Guards Marine Brigade is, on paper, an elite naval infantry unit. The Guards designation is a mark of honor, signifying a unit with a distinguished history. However, its recent history in Ukraine has been one of carnage and failure. The brigade was decimated in disastrous frontal assaults on Ukrainian positions in Vuhledar, a battle that became infamous as a killing field for Russian armor and personnel. Despite being reconstituted with mobilized troops, its reputation has been irrevocably tarnished. The timing of the explosions during the morning arrival of personnel suggests a meticulously planned operation designed to inflict maximum casualties on the brigade's command and ranks, turning their own headquarters into a trap. The claim: a daring act of covert sabotage. Within hours, the fog of confusion began to clear as Ukrainian intelligence sources started to speak. Officials from the main intelligence directorate of the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine, known as HUR, claimed responsibility. In statements to outlets like the Kyiv Post, an unnamed HUR source declared the operation a complete success. This was not a missile or a drone, they clarified. A conventional strike was an operational impossibility. The distance alone, over 6,000 kilometers, is far beyond the reach of Ukraine's longest-range UAVs, which would also have to navigate thousands of kilometers of Russia's layered air defense systems and electronic warfare jamming grids. Instead, the HUR source confirmed the attack was the work of operatives on the ground. This implies a level of infiltration and logistical support deep inside Russian territory that many analysts thought was unattainable for Kiev. The source emphasized the choice of target was deliberate. The 155th Brigade is notorious for its brutality against civilians and executions of Ukrainian prisoners of war, they stated. We expect obituaries to soon appear in local media. The claim was not just of a successful military strike, but of an act of calculated retribution. The two realities, disinformation versus a city on lockdown. Moscow's official response was swift and dismissive. State-controlled media channels reported that the explosions were due to a technical malfunction or an incident with gas equipment. This narrative is part of a familiar Russian playbook of downplaying or denying successful enemy attacks, similar to the accidental fire explanation given for the sinking of the Black Sea Fleet's flagship, the Moskva. However, the reality on the ground, in and around Vladivostok, told a very different story. Almost immediately, a massive security cordon was thrown around the region. Eyewitnesses reported and shared videos of heavily armed police and military personnel setting up checkpoints on major roads, causing miles-long traffic jams as they inspected nearly every vehicle. A helicopter was seen conducting aerial surveillance over the Shketova area, while unmarked vehicles carrying personnel from the FSB, Russia's internal security service, were seen rushing to the scene. The military compound itself and several nearby administrative buildings were sealed off. This was not the response to a simple gas accident. It was a full-scale counter-sabotage operation, a frantic manhunt for the ghosts who had struck them and vanished. The blueprint, a clear pattern of deep strikes. The Shketova bombing was not an isolated event. It follows a clear and chilling blueprint, a signature style of attack that suggests a sustained campaign by Ukrainian intelligence. First, a few months back, the very same 155th Brigade was targeted in a similar attack in Vladivostok's Desantnaya Bay region. Two large explosions ripped through military equipment and personnel. At the time, Russia also blamed the incident on exploding propane-butane cylinders, an excuse that now appears to be a standard, pre-prepared explanation. Second, and perhaps more significantly, just the week prior to the most recent strike, HUR operatives reportedly used the exact same modus operandi, two explosive devices planted in a parking lot, to attack the headquarters of a Russian National Guard unit. This unit was particularly infamous because it housed soldiers from the group known as the Butchers of Bucha. The massacre in Bucha, where hundreds of civilians were found tortured and executed after Russian forces withdrew, became a global symbol of Russian war crimes. Targeting that specific unit was a clear signal that Ukraine is hunting down individuals and groups responsible for specific atrocities. 3 attacks, all using the same method, all targeting units notorious for war crimes. This is not a coincidence, it is a campaign. The motive, an unpayable debt of blood. To understand why Ukraine would risk such a complex operation, one must understand the depth of suffering inflicted by the Russian military. The desire for retribution is fueled by an ever-growing list of documented atrocities that violate the Geneva Conventions and basic human decency. The systematic torture of prisoners of war. International bodies have painted a gruesome picture of the treatment of Ukrainian captives. A stark report from the UN Human Rights Monitoring Mission in Ukraine, HRMMU, published last year, was particularly damning. Almost every single one of the Ukrainian POWs we interviewed described how Russian service persons or officials tortured them, reported Danielle Bell, the head of the mission. She detailed widespread use of repeated beatings, electric shocks, threats of execution, prolonged stress positions, and mock executions. The report also confirmed that over half of the prisoners of war interviewed were subjected to sexual violence. In a chilling statistic, the HRMMU verified 32 summary executions of Ukrainian POWs in the 3-month period over last winter alone. The personal account of freed POW Maxim Butkevich illustrates this systemic cruelty. He described being subjected to both physical and psychological torment. His captors would mock soldiers about their wives back home in sickening detail, force them to recite Russian propaganda, and beat them with wooden sticks for any mistake. During interrogations, he was subjected to electric shocks and beatings with rubber batons, all while being held incommunicado, a policy Amnesty International calls a deliberate tool to dehumanize and silence prisoners. A war on civilians. Beyond the battlefield, Russia has waged a relentless war on Ukraine's civilian population. According to data compiled through this past summer, the conflict had resulted in the deaths of thousands of Ukrainian civilians, a number that includes hundreds of children. Tens of thousands more have been injured. These are not just collateral damage. They are the result of what a UN Independent International Commission of Inquiry report from earlier this year calls a climate of lawlessness and systematic terror tactics. Russian forces have indiscriminately shelled residential areas and targeted critical infrastructure, apartment buildings, schools, and hospitals with missile and drone strikes, aiming to break the will of the Ukrainian people. The evolution, Ukraine's clandestine power. The ability to conduct an operation like the one in Shketova is the result of a radical transformation within Ukraine's intelligence services. For years, Ukraine's HUR and its domestic security service, the SBU, have been quietly evolving from their Soviet-era origins into formidable, modern agencies. As reported by the National Interest, this evolution has been significantly accelerated by deep collaboration with Western intelligence agencies, including America's CIA and the UK's MI6. This partnership has provided advanced training, cutting-edge technology, and critical intelligence sharing, allowing Ukrainian services to operate with Mossad-like capabilities. Furthermore, Ukraine is embracing the future of intelligence warfare. HUR Chief Kirilo Budanov has confirmed his organization is now using artificial intelligence to process vast amounts of data, analyze intelligence, and accelerate decision-making. Artificial intelligence performs in a fraction of the time what used to take people hours, Budanov stated. This technological edge allows Ukraine to identify vulnerabilities and act with a speed and precision that continually surprises its larger adversary. The explosions in Shchitova signal a new and terrifying phase of the war. They prove that for Russia, there is no longer a safe rear. The conflict is not confined to the trenches of the Donbass. It is being fought in the parking lots of Vladivostok, in the digital realm of cyberspace, and in the shadows of occupied cities. This is a war of attrition, not just of soldiers and ammunition, but of morale and security. The official Russian narrative of accidents and incompetence can only hold for so long against the growing evidence of a sophisticated and relentless campaign of retribution. The ultimate question is no longer if Ukraine can strike deep inside Russia, but where and when it will choose to strike next.